They didn't know I was still awake. That's the only reason I heard it. Through the thin crack of the bedroom door, her whisper curled like smoke into the hallway. Tomorrow we'll lock her away. Calm, casual, as if she were talking about putting a coat into storage, not her husband's 78-year-old mother. I didn't breathe, didn't move. I sat on the edge of the bed in the dark, hands pressed flat against my thighs. My suitcase was already half packed. I'd started folding clothes after dinner, not because I'd planned to run, not yet, but because something in the air told me I should be ready. 2 months ago, I moved into my son Andrew's house. My little cottage had become too much to manage after the hip surgery, and Andrew said, "You'll be better off here, Mom. We'll take care of you." I believed him. I sold the house. I wired the money to his account. He said he'd invest it for me, and I didn't ask questions. I didn't want to seem suspicious. I wanted to believe he loved me enough to make room for me. But love isn't measured in guest rooms and promises. It's in tone, in patience. In whether your teacup is refilled at the table, or whether someone sighs when you ask for a slice of bread. Tonight, I had dinner alone in the kitchen. Sarah said they were going out just for an hour and left me with leftovers in plastic containers. I didn't mind that. I minded the way she glanced at her watch when I asked how her day was, as if even a few seconds of conversation with me were an interruption. I'd just finished rinsing my cup when they came home. I stayed in the room until I heard them head upstairs. It was when I was getting ready for bed, the door slightly open to let the cat come in, that I heard it. Her voice, that whisper. "She's getting slower," Sarah said. And she asked about the money again. "We'll handle it tomorrow." Quietly. I stood frozen for a long time, long after their footsteps faded into the bedroom. Then I moved, quietly, methodically. I closed the door, locked it, pulled the suitcase out from under the bed. I didn't cry. I don't cry easily, not anymore. But my hands trembled as I folded my wool cardigan, the blue one with worn elbows that Andrew always said made me look too old. I added my papers, passport, the envelope with my medical records, the folder I wasn't supposed to find last week in Andrew's drawer, labeled with my name. The clock said 12:43 a.m. I wasn't sure where I'd go. I had no plan, just one instinct: leave, before they made that whisper real. Outside, the street was quiet. The neighborhood was too polished, identical houses, cars without dust, sidewalks without cracks. I didn't belong here. I never had. I opened the front door without a sound. Shoes in one hand, suitcase in the other. I didn't leave a note. What could I possibly write? Thank you for the hospitality. I paused just once at the end of the walkway, looking back at the house where my son lived, where my name was no longer welcome at the table. Then I turned, stepped onto the street, and walked toward whatever would come next. The suitcase felt heavier with every step, not from weight, but from the shame packed into it. I didn't know where I was walking to. I just knew I couldn't stay. The bus stop was 2 blocks down. I walked barefoot, shoes still in my hand. The pavement was cool from the night air, and the silence pressed against my skin like a second coat. I passed 3 houses before a motion sensor clicked on and bathed me in light. I paused, caught like a thief in someone else's security, and for a second, I wanted to turn back. Just knock on the door, say it was a mistake, say I was tired and misunderstood what I'd heard. But I hadn't misunderstood. The whisper had been clear. Tomorrow, we'll lock her away. And the silence that followed had been even louder. Andrew hadn't objected. Not one word. No, that's too much. No, she's my mother. Not even a sigh of discomfort. Just silence. A silence that said, "Fine." I sat on the metal bench at the corner of Cypress and Maple. The last bus would be coming in 12 minutes if the schedule was still the same. I hadn't taken public transportation since before the surgery. Since before I handed over the last piece of independence I had and moved into a house where I didn't belong. The street was empty. A porch light blinked across the road, but no one came out. I slipped my shoes on and zipped up my coat. Not for warmth. It was early fall and the night was gentle, but for the feeling of being enclosed, held together. I glanced at the envelope in my bag. I hadn't meant to find it. A week ago, I'd been looking for batteries in the kitchen drawer. Sarah kept a stash there. She was always controlling about what was hers and what wasn't. And instead, I found a thick white envelope with my name typed neatly on the front. No return address. Inside were copies of forms I didn't recognize at first. A power of attorney I'd never signed. Financial withdrawals. Transfers. Insurance claims. My signature at the bottom of each. But it wasn't mine. Not quite. Close enough, though, for someone who wanted it to be convincing. Close enough for a bank clerk in a rush or a notary who didn't ask questions. The handwriting mimicked my loops and spacing, but the slant was wrong. A practiced imitation. I'd folded the documents back inside and returned them without a sound. That night, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, remembering things that hadn't seemed strange before. The urgent push for me to sell my house. The way Andrew insisted on handling all the calls with the financial advisor, the quick, quiet way Sarah took over my medications and organized my files. The whisper I heard tonight wasn't a beginning. It was the final line in a plan that had been unfolding for months. The bus came. I stood, pulled my bag behind me, and climbed aboard. The driver, a heavy-set man in his 50s, barely glanced at me. "Anywhere in particular?" he asked. "Just downtown," I said. "Near the old library." He nodded. "You're out late." I didn't answer. I watched the empty streets blur into each other as the bus hummed forward. Streetlights flashed across the windows in rhythm. Each flash a thought. He knew. She forged. They wanted me gone. 20 minutes later, I stepped off in a part of town I hadn't been to in years. The hotel I remembered was gone. In its place stood a lit-up glass building. I wandered until I found a small motor lodge tucked between a gas station and a 24-hour diner. The woman behind the counter barely looked up when I said, "One night." The room was small, clean enough. It smelled of bleach and something older, something permanent. I locked the door behind me and set the suitcase on the chair. Only then did I let myself exhale fully. I sat on the edge of the bed and looked at the phone in my hand. No missed calls. No messages. Of course not. They hadn't noticed yet. Or they had, and decided not to ask where I'd gone. The worst part wasn't the whisper. It wasn't even the forged signature or the fake smiles. It was the knowing, the certainty that at some point in the past year, I'd stopped being a mother to Andrew. I'd become an account, a signature, a room that cost more than it gave, a burden. I took off my shoes and lay back on the bed, fully dressed. I wasn't afraid. Not yet. That would come later. Tonight I was just tired, but tomorrow I'd begin. I didn't sleep much. The motel sheets were stiff, and the hum of the fridge sounded like a distant train, never stopping, always pushing forward. I lay on top of the covers, staring at the cracked ceiling, replaying everything. Her whisper, the envelope, the way Andrew avoided my eyes at dinner. I'd never meant to be a problem. I didn't come to their house expecting much. I thought I'd help with errands, maybe keep Sarah company, spend a little time with the kids, though that part never materialized. They were always too busy, too scheduled, and maybe I was too old to be interesting. At first it was just small things. My favorite chair moved to the garage. My tea mug replaced with a newer one, thinner, prettier, but it burned my fingers. Sarah rearranged the pantry, said it was more efficient now, though I could never find the salt. Andrew said it was all for my comfort, but it always felt like I was being managed, not cared for. I got up before the sun rose and made tea with the motel's rusty little kettle. It tasted metallic, but it was hot, and I needed something to hold. The quiet in that room was different from the quiet in their house. There, it had weight. Watchful, waiting to correct me if I sat too long at the table or turned the TV up too loud. Here, it was just silence. No judgment. Just stillness. I opened my suitcase to change and paused, again, at the envelope. I hadn't dared open it again last night. Just knowing it existed had been enough to steal the breath from my chest. But this morning, I needed to see it. I needed to know what, exactly, they'd taken. The papers were neat, clipped together. Copies, not originals. Maybe they'd been meant for the shredder. Maybe Sarah forgot she'd put them in the drawer. There were 3 main documents. One was a general power of attorney, authorizing Andrew to act on my behalf in financial and legal matters, including but not limited to banking, property, and medical decisions. Signed in my name, witnessed, even notarized. The signature was good. Not perfect, but close. I'd seen it before, on birthday cards Sarah had filled out, from all of us, when Andrew was busy. The same slight curve in the D, the same forced neatness. The second was a transaction history from Andrew's investment account. Multiple transfers from an account labeled with my old address, the one linked to the sale of my cottage. $180,000 gone in 4 months. Not a single call to ask if I needed anything. Not a word. The third was a draft application. Assisted living facility. My name typed neatly at the top. Age, medical conditions, mobility notes. One line stood out, bolded. Patient demonstrates early signs of cognitive decline. That's what Sarah said last week when I couldn't find the house keys. Maybe it's time to get your memory checked, Mom. She'd said it sweetly, with a hand on my shoulder. I laughed, thinking it was a joke. Apparently, it wasn't. I folded the papers back slowly. My hands were steady now. I was done being shocked. Done giving the benefit of the doubt. I didn't want revenge, not really. What I wanted was mine. My name, my choices, my voice. I'd spent decades raising a boy who used to run to me when he scraped his knee, who cried the first time his dog died. I didn't know when that boy became a man who saw me as disposable. But I wasn't going to ask for his love anymore. Some things, once broken, don't come back. At 8, I called a cab. The driver was young, polite, didn't ask questions when I said, "Take me to Fairmont Bank, downtown branch." I sat in the back, clutching my bag like a lifeline. It was the same bank where Andrew used to bring me to sign documents. I always let him talk to the tellers. He said he explained things better. The woman at the front desk had a name tag that read, Marcy. She smiled, then faltered when she saw my face. "I'd like to speak with a manager," I said. "It's regarding power of attorney and financial oversight." She nodded quickly and disappeared down a hallway. A few minutes later, a man in a gray suit appeared, mid-30s, clean-shaven, with tired eyes. "Mrs. Jordan?" he said. "I'm David. Let's go to my office." Inside, I handed him the envelope. I didn't explain. Just waited while he flipped through the pages. After a long pause, he looked up. "Did you sign this power of attorney?" "No." Do you recall authorizing these transfers? No. Has anyone accessed your accounts on your behalf recently? My son, Andrew Jordan. He nodded, lips pressed into a thin line. Mrs. Jordan, this is serious. Forging a signature on a legal document is a felony. And if these funds were moved without your knowledge, we'll need to open an internal investigation. I'm not here to press charges, I said. Not yet. I'm here to stop everything. Right now. David leaned forward. You want to revoke this power of attorney? Yes. Today. And freeze any access he has to your accounts? Everything. Cancel automatic payments, shut down shared access, and I'd like to move the remaining funds. To where? I took a breath. I hadn't decided this part until that moment, but suddenly it was clear. To a new account, in my name only. I'll need help setting up secure access, and eventually, I want to transfer control to someone else, but not my son. David nodded. We can absolutely do that. We spent the next hour reviewing everything, every payment Andrew had authorized, every form Sarah had notarized through a friend. It wasn't just theft. It was erasure. Quiet, polite erasure. By the time I left the bank, it was almost noon. My feet ached. My back protested. But I stood taller. This was the first day in months I belonged to myself. I stepped out of the bank into the thin, crisp air of mid-morning. The city had begun to stir in full. Cars honking, people brushing past each other with paper cups and phones pressed to their ears. I stood still for a moment, holding my coat closed at the collar, unsure what to do next. I hadn't thought this far ahead. I hadn't thought beyond the bus bench and the motel and the man at the bank who told me, gently but firmly, that what had been done to me wasn't just unkind. It was illegal. But legal or not, what do you do when your child looks at you and sees only liability? I walked for blocks, slowly, until I found a bench tucked under an old elm tree across from a public park. I sat, the suitcase beside me, and rested my hands in my lap. The envelope was there, folded neatly, but I didn't need to look at it again. I could see every word burned behind my eyes. I didn't feel sad. That would come later, maybe. What I felt was a hollow sort of clarity. The kind you get when the noise dies down, and all that's left is the truth. It wasn't about the money. It was about being erased. About the way Sarah smiled and corrected me when I told a story at dinner. About how Andrew started talking about senior services within a week of me moving in. About how my bedroom door didn't lock. About how my mail began arriving already opened. About how I hadn't received a birthday card from my grandson in 2 years, not even a call. They thought I was fading, easy to move, easy to silence. And maybe I had started to believe that too. Until last night. A gust of wind pushed fallen leaves across the sidewalk. I pulled my coat tighter. I hadn't brought enough for cold weather. I hadn't thought I'd be outside for more than a day. I wasn't sure if I had a place to go now, but I had control again. That was more than I'd had in months. A woman with a stroller walked past me. She glanced at me, then looked away. I wasn't offended. I didn't want pity. I just wanted to sit in this strange, empty quiet and figure out what came next. My phone buzzed in my pocket. For a second, I didn't move. I just stared straight ahead. Then I pulled it out. The screen lit up with Andrew's name. I let it ring until it stopped. Then came the message. Mom, where are you? Please call me. I didn't answer. I didn't owe him that. A few minutes later, another message appeared, this time from Sarah. We woke up and your room was empty. This is really unfair. You're scaring the kids." I stared at that one longer. The kids? Scared. They hadn't said 10 words to me in the last month. They avoided me in the hallway like I was a bad smell. And now they were scared? No. Sarah was scared. Scared that her nice little plan was crumbling. Scared that the old woman she meant to lock away had slipped out the front door with a suitcase and a secret. Good. Let her be scared. I closed the messages without responding. I didn't know what to do next, but I knew who I needed to see. There was a name on a card David, the bank manager, had given me. A lawyer. Someone who could walk me through the rest of the process. Someone who could help me make sure this wouldn't happen again. Her office was 6 blocks away. I stood up, stretched the ache from my back, and pulled my suitcase along behind me. It rolled noisily over the cracked pavement. The receptionist was young, with a soft voice. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," I said, "but David from Fairmont Bank told me to come." She nodded and disappeared through a side door. A few minutes later, a woman in her early 40s came out. Tailored jacket, soft gray eyes, not much makeup. She extended her hand. "Mrs. Jordan? I'm Elise Becker. David called. Come with me." We sat in a private office with tall bookshelves and heavy curtains. I opened the envelope one more time. Elise read through everything slowly, her eyes narrowing. When she finished, she looked up at me and said, "I'm so sorry. This happens more often than people think, especially to older women who trust too easily." "I didn't think I was being naive," I said quietly. "Just hopeful." "You weren't naive," she said. "You were loving, and they took advantage." We spent nearly 2 hours together. She explained my rights, what the forged documents meant legally, what actions could be taken. She used words like fraud, financial exploitation, elder abuse. I nodded through them, though they sounded like someone else's life. I wasn't ready to talk about court. I wasn't sure I wanted to. But I did want protection. "I want a new will," I said. "I want everything rewritten." She didn't blink. "We can do that. And I want to transfer financial power to someone else, not my son." "Do you have someone in mind?" I thought of Clara, my niece in Arizona. Kind, reliable. She'd sent birthday cards every year, even when I didn't answer. She'd visited after my surgery, brought soup and magazines, and didn't ask about money. "Yes," I said. "I'll call her." Elise began drafting documents while I sat there, sipping the lukewarm tea her assistant brought in. Her office was warm and smelled like lavender. For the first time since the motel room, I felt something settle inside me. Not peace, exactly, but footing. I was still standing. When I left her office, my phone had 4 missed calls, all from Andrew, and 1 voicemail. I didn't listen. Instead, I turned the phone off. Let them wonder. Let them sit in the silence for once. Let them feel what it's like to wait for a call that never comes. The sun had started its slow descent by the time I stepped out of Elise's office. I stood on the sidewalk for a moment, blinking at the light. My suitcase rolled behind me like a tired companion. I hadn't eaten all day, but I wasn't hungry. There was something sharper in my stomach. Not pain, not quite fear. Something like readiness. I found a bench near the train station and sat down. I wasn't sure where I would sleep that night. The motel was an option, but part of me didn't want to go back there. I needed something else. Something unfamiliar. A small act of defiance, maybe. A reminder that I could still choose. I opened my bag to look for a sweater and felt the edge of the envelope again. My hand brushed the contents I already knew by heart. The forged power of attorney, the bank transfers, the draft admission forms to a care facility. But there was something else tucked behind them. A second envelope. Sealed. Heavier. I didn't remember packing it. It must have been there by accident. Or maybe Sarah had left it in the drawer without realizing. I opened it slowly. Inside, more forms. Property records. Loan applications. One was a refinance agreement on my old house. Dated just 2 weeks after I moved in with Andrew and Sarah. I stared at it, then looked closer. The house hadn't been sold once. It had been sold twice. Andrew had forged a second transfer using my name to take out equity after the first sale. They'd claimed I was still the legal owner, used that as leverage to pull another loan against it. But the worst part was the note paper-clipped to the back. In Sarah's handwriting, small and perfect. Make sure she doesn't see mail from Ridgeway Title. Redirect notices starting next week. They hadn't just taken my money. They'd planned to drain every last trace of my life before handing me over to a facility and walking away clean. I folded the papers slowly, hands steady. So that was the plan. Sell the house, take the money, forge the signature, refinance again, lock me up. Smile for Christmas cards. Let the doctors blame it on age. But I wasn't confused. I wasn't lost. I was angry. Not the loud kind. Not the messy kind. The kind that sits low in the belly and waits. That sharpens itself on silence and time. I sat there on that bench for a long time, watching people move through the world, some laughing, some rushing, none of them knowing what it meant to vanish piece by piece inside your own family. They'd tried to turn me into a shadow, but I'd remembered who I was, and tomorrow I'd remind them too. I didn't go back to the motel that night. I walked until my legs ached, then checked into a modest bed and breakfast a few blocks from the courthouse. The woman at the desk didn't ask questions, just handed me a key and pointed down the hall. The room was small, but warm. A patchwork quilt on the bed. A lamp with a crack in the base. It felt like a place where someone could rest and still feel real. I slept deeply for the first time in weeks. No dreams. No footsteps outside my door. No whispers. In the morning, I got dressed, tied my scarf, and called the bank. David answered on the second ring. "Mrs. Jordan," he said, his voice already tense. "I was going to call you. We've flagged several more transactions. One of them was attempted just this morning, a transfer of $12,000 to a private contractor. The account was Andrew's. The authorization came from a joint account that listed you as co-owner." "I want it blocked," I said calmly. "We already froze it," he replied. "But he may try again. He's likely going to notice soon." "I assume he already has." There was a pause. "Do you want to report it formally?" "I can refer you to our fraud unit." "Not yet," I said. "But keep everything stopped, every transfer, every link, everything with my name on it. I want full access moved to my new account and nothing else touched." "Yes, ma'am." I could hear him typing in the background. "Also," I said, "I want to see a printout. Everything Andrew or Sarah touched, every withdrawal, every transfer, all of it." "We'll prepare the full report," he said. "It'll be ready for pickup this afternoon." After I hung up, I sat quietly on the edge of the bed, staring at the curtain fluttering in the breeze. I thought about my house, the one they'd sold and resold like it meant nothing. I thought about the garden I'd tended for 20 years, the hydrangeas I planted after my husband died. Gone now, covered in concrete and profit. And yet somehow I didn't feel broken. I felt sharp. Sharper than I had in years. By 10, I was back at the bank. David handed me the folder himself, face grim. "This is everything from the last 18 months," he said. "The amount moved is significant." I sat down in the small private room, opened the folder, and began reading. Page after page, withdrawals labeled home maintenance. But I hadn't lived in a house that needed fixing. Medical expenses, but I'd never seen those doctors. Investment transfers. Into Andrew's name, always temporary, he'd told the clerk, just moving funds around for tax strategy. And the worst, automatic transfers I never noticed. A slow bleed of $600 here, $400 there, set to hit monthly, subscriptions, insurance policies, a cleaning service, a landscaping company. I had been paying for the house I no longer owned, for their groceries, for their vacations. One line made my hand go cold. Tuition, Grandview Academy. Annual. I stared at it. That was Sarah's niece's school, not even family, just someone they wanted to impress. I turned back to David. "I want all of this stopped," I said. "It's already done," he assured me. "But you need to understand, this qualifies as financial exploitation. If you change your mind about legal steps, I'll handle that part separately," I said. He nodded. "Would you like help setting up alerts so you can see every transaction going forward?" "Yes, and I want physical statements mailed to my new address. No online access, no sharing, no digital trail." "Understood." He left me in the room for a few minutes while he finalized the changes. When he returned, he had a card in his hand. "One more thing," he said. "There's a support organization for older adults who've gone through situations like this. They help with housing, legal aid, emotional support. It's confidential. You don't have to." I took the card before he could finish. "Thank you," I said. "I might call." That afternoon, I did. Not because I needed a therapist or a place to cry, but because I needed a witness, someone to say, "Yes, this happened. And no, you weren't crazy." The woman who answered, her name was Patrice, spoke gently, but not with pity. She didn't sound surprised. She just said, "You're not alone." And I believed her. Patrice met me the next morning at a small community center tucked between a church and a grocery store. Nothing fancy, just a clean front desk, quiet hallways, and the smell of coffee drifting in from a side room. She was in her 50s, with silver-streaked hair and soft eyes that didn't blink away from pain. "You must be May," she said, shaking my hand. "Come on back. We'll get started." Her office was simple. 2 chairs, a desk, and a bookshelf with pamphlets about elder rights, fraud, long-term care. I didn't look at the titles. I was tired of reading about people like me. "I don't want therapy," I said, before she could start. "And I'm not here to vent. I've done what I needed at the bank. I just want to make sure no one ever puts me in this position again." Patrice nodded without offense. "That's exactly what we'll do." She opened a folder and pulled out a short form. "I'll take down some background, and then I'll connect you with one of our legal partners. No cost to you, and if you need safe housing, we can help arrange that too. Transitional stays, independent units for women who've been displaced? I'm not displaced," I said. I left. She smiled gently. "That's even better." We talked for a while. I answered her questions, filled out a few forms. Then she picked up the phone and dialed someone named Ruth. 10 minutes later, I was sitting across from a new woman with sharp glasses and a quiet voice. "Tell me what you want," Ruth said. "Not what happened, just what you need moving forward." It was the first time anyone had asked me that without condescension. I want a new will, I said. Everything rewritten. My son and his wife removed entirely. I don't want them to receive a cent. Not even by mistake. Done. I want my financial power of attorney reassigned to someone I trust. Someone who will act only with my written permission. Do you have someone in mind? My niece, I said. Her name is Clara. Good. We'll send the forms to her for co-signing. I also want a living will, I added, and a medical directive. No one should be able to make decisions about my care but me, unless I've specifically named them. Ruth looked at me for a long moment, then nodded again. You're the kind of client we don't see often, she said. Most women come to us in pieces. You came already whole. Bruised, but whole. I didn't answer. I wasn't here to be praised. I just wanted it all clean, signed, filed. Over the next hour, we went through the details. The accounts, the property, the list of assets still in my name. She explained how the second mortgage Andrew had taken out could be challenged, since it had been done with forged signatures. But I would need to decide whether I wanted to press charges or simply sever the ties. I chose the second. For now. I don't want their money, I said. I want mine. I want my name back. I want silence from them. That, Ruth said, I can help with. By the time we finished, the sun was already low. She handed me a folder, a new one, clean and labeled with my name in her handwriting. Everything will be official by end of week, she said. Until then, no one can touch anything. And if they try, you call me. I stepped outside, holding the folder like it was made of glass. Everything I had built, every quiet step, every careful boundary, was now real. I wasn't afraid of Andrew anymore. I wasn't afraid of Sarah's whispers or forged papers or empty threats. They could scream. They could beg. They could send flowers and messages and voicemails. It wouldn't matter. Their access was gone. And I was no longer the woman who waited in her room to be told what came next. I was deciding now. And they would live with that. I hadn't called Irene in over a decade. We used to talk weekly, back when our husbands were still alive, and our children were young enough to worry us but not disappoint us. She moved to the coast after her second stroke, said the air was easier there. I sent her a card that Christmas, and she sent back a short note. Then nothing. Life had drifted us apart like leaves on different rivers. But that afternoon, as I sat alone in the bed and breakfast with the folder from Ruth in my lap, I dialed her number from memory. She picked up on the second ring. Hello? I knew her voice immediately. It was lower now, slower, but it still carried that old edge, like she'd always just finished telling someone off. Irene, I said, my voice breaking just a little. It's May. A pause. And then, May Jordan? Lord have mercy. Where have you been? I left, I said. Left Andrew's house. I needed to disappear, just for a bit. Another pause. This one different. Not surprise. Something more careful. Is everything all right? No, I said honestly. But I think it will be. She didn't ask questions. Just said, you have somewhere to sleep? Tonight, yes. Tomorrow. I don't know. You do now. I'm still in Newport. Got an extra bedroom, the one with the green quilt you hated. Come stay. I'm not asking. I'm telling. I let out a breath I hadn't known I was holding. Thank you. Pack your things, she said. I'll have soup waiting. The bus ride to Newport took 3 hours. I dozed through half of it, the folder clutched to my chest like a passport. When I got off, Irene was already waiting at the station, shorter than I remembered, but her eyes as sharp as ever. She didn't hug me right away. just looked at me hard. "You're thinner," she said, "and tired. Come on, we'll talk over tea." Her house was small, but filled with life. Photos everywhere, old records in the corner, a cat that hissed at my suitcase and then disappeared under the couch. She made soup like she always had, heavy on the garlic, no apologies. When we finally sat at the kitchen table, she poured 2 mugs of tea and waited. I told her everything. From the moment I moved in with Andrew, to the forged papers, to the whisper in the hallway. I told her about the bank, the lawyer, the envelope. She didn't interrupt. Not once. When I finished, she leaned back, folding her arms. Damn. I smiled despite myself. "And here I thought my daughter-in-law was the queen of cruelty," she added. "Yours sounds like she could teach a course." "It's not just her," I said. "Andrew let it happen. He watched it happen. That's what breaks me." Irene nodded. "Oh, honey. We raise them to stand tall, and they grow up thinking we're the floor." That silence settled in again. Not awkward, not sad. Just full of all the things we both had lived and never said aloud. "You're staying as long as you need," she said. "I mean it. And if you want quiet, I'll give you quiet. If you want to scream into the sea, I'll hold your coat." I laughed. A real laugh. The first one in longer than I could remember. That night, she gave me the room with the green quilt, after all. And as I lay in bed, listening to the waves through the cracked window, I felt something unfamiliar return to my chest. Not safety. Not yet. But something close. The phone started ringing just after 8 the next morning. I let it vibrate once, then turned it face down on the nightstand and walked out to the porch, where Irene was already sitting with her tea and a wool shawl draped around her shoulders. "Let me guess," she said without looking at me. "Your ghost just realized it's missing." I didn't answer. I sat beside her, wrapping my hands around a warm mug she'd left for me. The ocean was calm that morning, the air salted and damp. My suitcase sat untouched in the corner of the guest room, and for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel the need to unpack or plan. I just existed. The phone rang again, then again, 6 times in the next hour. All Andrew, no voicemail. Just the name flashing over and over, as if urgency could erase what he'd done. "He's not worried about you," Irene said. "He's worried about whatever access you've taken with you." I nodded. I already knew. Later that morning, I turned the phone on silent. Messages began to stack one by one. "Mom, please call me. We're worried. Where are you? Sarah's panicking. I need to talk to you right now. This has gone too far." I watched them appear without feeling much. Each word read like a script. I could already hear his voice. Tense, controlled, maybe even a little hurt, as if I'd betrayed him. I didn't reply. Instead, I went into the kitchen and helped Irene chop vegetables for lunch. Between the soft thuds of the knife and the hiss of boiling water, she asked, "Do you want to tell Clara what's happening? About the legal papers?" "I will," I said, "when it's time." "And the rest of them?" "I'm done talking to people who only listen when they need something." She nodded, dropping carrots into the pot. My phone buzzed on the table. I didn't move. That afternoon, a new message appeared. This one from Sarah. "This is getting out of hand. If you don't return Andrew's calls, we'll have to take other steps. You can't just disappear like this. People are asking questions." I reread it 3 times. That was her worry. Not me. Not my health. Not whether I was safe or scared or even alive. Just appearances. People were asking questions. I almost laughed. They had told themselves for so long that I was fading, slipping, losing control. And now, they were the ones chasing ghosts, dialing silence. They could keep dialing. That night, I walked down to the beach with Irene. We didn't say much, just listened to the water and let the cold slip into our bones. I never thought I'd be 78, I said finally, and still figuring out how to leave people behind. That's how you know you're still alive, she said, when you're still willing to walk away. Back at the house, I charged my phone and opened the messages again. 15 from Andrew, 9 from Sarah, 2 from a number I didn't recognize. I scrolled to the very bottom and saw one I hadn't noticed before, from an old contact I hadn't expected. Grandma? It's Lucas. Are you okay? My grandson. I stared at the message for a long time, then turned off the phone again. Not because I didn't care, but because, for once, I would answer on my own time. The letter arrived 2 days later. A real one. Envelope, stamp, even her handwriting on the front in that perfect, narrow script Sarah used when she wanted to seem gracious. Irene brought it in from the mailbox, eyebrows raised. You sure you want to open that? She asked, handing it to me with a dish rag still in her hand. I'm sure, I said. I want to see how she spins it. I sat down at the kitchen table and slid it open with a butter knife. The paper was thick. Expensive. Of course it was. May, I hope you're safe and comfortable, wherever you are. We've all been deeply concerned about you. Andrew hasn't been able to sleep. The children are asking questions. We're trying to hold everything together in your absence. I won't pretend to understand why you left the way you did, or why you've refused to respond to Andrew's calls. I'm sure you have your reasons, though from where we sit, it feels disproportionate, unkind. I paused there. Unkind, I said aloud, more to myself than to Irene. I read on. We've always tried to support you in every way we could. Opening our home, managing your affairs during your recovery. It hasn't been easy balancing everything, but we did it out of love, not obligation. I hope you haven't forgotten that. Now, however, things have become complicated. The accounts are locked. Services are disrupted. Andrew is being contacted by banks, by vendors, by people who don't understand what's going on. It's putting enormous pressure on the family. This isn't what anyone wanted. We're still willing to talk, to make things right. But we can't do that while you remain unreachable. You're part of this family, May, and families don't run away from each other. No signature, just her name, printed cleanly at the bottom. Sarah. I folded the letter slowly, set it on the table, and sat back in my chair. Irene was watching me. Well? She asked. I shook my head. She's not even angry. That's the worst part. She still thinks she's the reasonable one. They always do, Irene muttered, wiping her hands on her apron. It didn't hurt, not like I'd expected. Reading her words, so carefully chosen, so polite on the surface, was like seeing a costume on a hanger. There was no real shape behind it, just posture, performance, unkind. That word stayed with me, as if I'd snapped at someone over dinner, as if I hadn't watched them siphon away the bones of my life, bit by bit, while smiling through it all. No apology, no admission, just concern over the consequences of getting caught. I pushed the letter aside and stood up. Burn it? Irene asked, already reaching for the matches. No, I said. Let it sit for a while. Let it feel ignored. The next morning, I wrote no reply. I made breakfast instead, washed the dishes, took a walk by the shore, let them talk, let them wonder. I wasn't part of that house anymore, not their plans, not their polite lies. I had no more to say, and that, finally, was enough. I met her by accident. I was coming out of the corner store with a loaf of bread and a small jar of honey when I saw her drop a stack of folders in the parking lot. Papers scattered in the wind like birds startled from a tree. She bent down, frustrated, chasing them with one hand while the other held her phone to her ear. I didn't think. I just moved. I set my bag on the curb and helped gather the pages, pressing them down under my hand until she could grab them. She looked up, out of breath. Thank you. God, thank you. She was young, mid-30s maybe. Her jacket had a patch on the shoulder, North Coast Community Services. We stood up together. You okay? I asked. She smiled sheepishly. I will be. I've got 3 appointments today, I'm behind, and the copier broke this morning. But that's not your problem. Thank you again. She reached for the last page, glanced at my face and paused. Wait, are you May Jordan? I blinked. Yes. Her smile softened. I thought so. Patrice mentioned you, from Elder Services. That's right, I said carefully. How do you know Patrice? I work with her sometimes. I'm a field coordinator. Housing and outreach, mostly. She shifted the papers into one arm and held out her hand. I'm Lila. We shook. I didn't expect to run into you here, she added. I actually read your intake report last week. You're kind of famous in our office right now. I laughed, despite myself. That's never a good sentence. No, seriously. Most people in your position stay quiet. They let it happen. You didn't. You drew a line. It was either that or vanish, I said. Lila looked at me for a long moment, then reached into her coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I probably shouldn't be mixing business and groceries, she said. But I have a unit. Safe housing. 1 bedroom, no stairs, quiet building. It's usually reserved for emergency placements, but I think you qualify. I looked at the paper, then at her. What's the catch? No catch. It's yours for up to 6 months. No rent. Utilities covered. You'd have privacy. Freedom. And strings? She shook her head. Just one. You check in with me once a week. Not because I don't trust you, just so you're not alone. I didn't answer right away. I watched the wind move through the trees behind her, the way the sky had turned pale and wide. A place of my own. Not borrowed, not conditional. I took the paper. I'll think about it. Of course, she said. Take your time, but don't wait too long. Places like this don't stay open. 2 days later, I moved in. It wasn't fancy. Small kitchen, older carpet, a window that stuck when you opened it. But it was mine. I unpacked my suitcase slowly. No rush. Each folded sweater, each notebook, each pair of socks felt like it had earned the right to be there. Lila came by the next morning with fresh towels and 2 mugs. Just in case you want coffee with someone, she said. Or don't. We sat for a while. She didn't pry. Just told me about her job, her dog, her aging mother who still tried to drive without glasses. I listened. I didn't talk much. But something about her rhythm calmed me. When she left, she said, You don't owe anyone an answer, but you deserve to ask yourself what you want now. Not what you'll tolerate. What you want. That night, I stood at the window in my new apartment. The lights outside were soft. No one was watching me. No one had access to my drawers or my name or my future. For the first time in years, I felt unclaimed, and I liked it. The library was 6 blocks from the apartment Lila helped me settle into. a low building with faded bricks and a crooked open sign in the front window. I found it one afternoon when I was walking without purpose, which I'd started doing often. There was something soothing about having nowhere to be and no one expecting you to explain why. Inside, it smelled like paper and dust and old polish. The kind of smell that reminded me of schools in the 60s, of waiting for my children to pick out a book while I watched the clock and thought about dinner. There were only 2 people at the front desk, a young man with headphones in, sorting returns, and a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and a frayed cardigan. She looked up as I wandered past the biography shelf. "You lost, or just quiet?" she asked. "Quiet," I said. "Mostly." She nodded. "Same." Her name was Judith, a volunteer, just like I would become. It started simple. She was short-staffed on Tuesdays, and I liked the way she didn't treat me like I was fragile. I helped shelve the large print novels. Then I sorted donations. Then I started reading aloud on Thursdays. Small groups, mostly women, some older than me, some younger. All of us held together by unspoken things. No one asked about my past. No one pitied me. And I didn't offer more than what I chose. I liked it that way. There was a rhythm to the days now. I'd wake early, open the blinds to the sound of gulls, make tea, and walk to the library with my scarf tied tight. Sometimes I stopped at the bakery across the street. Sometimes I just sat on the bench out front and listened. I didn't miss the house. Not the one Andrew sold. Not the one Sarah filled with her rules. What I missed, sometimes, was the version of me who thought that family meant safety. That love was enough. But that version was gone now. And in her place was someone quieter, but sharper. Someone who had learned how to belong to herself. One afternoon, Judith handed me a stack of flyers. "Community talk next week," she said. "Elder advocacy. You should come." "I've had enough of talking," I said. "Not for you," she replied. "For them." You'd be surprised who listens when the right person stands up. I folded the flyer into my coat pocket. I wasn't sure I was ready to stand again, but the idea didn't scare me like it used to. Later that week, a woman came in with her grandson. She was probably near my age, dressed in clothes that looked borrowed and too large. She kept looking over her shoulder, as if expecting someone to come pull her back. I saw myself in her, or who I might have become had I not left when I did. She asked where the large print books were. I showed her. We didn't talk much, but as she turned to go, she said quietly, "You volunteer here?" "I do." She nodded once. "That's good. It means someone still sees you." I didn't answer, just smiled. That evening, I sat at my little kitchen table and thought about what Lila said, about asking myself what I wanted, not just what I could endure. And what I wanted, maybe more than anything, was not to vanish, not into their house, not into their silence. I wanted to be useful, yes, but not necessary. Seen, but not controlled. Free, but not forgotten. And for the first time in a long time, I believed I was building a life where that was possible. It was a Wednesday. Overcast. Quiet. I was at the front desk helping Judith sort overdue slips when I looked up and saw him standing just inside the doors. Lucas, my grandson. He was taller now, taller than I remembered. Hair longer, shoulders sharper. Still just a boy in some ways, but the kind of boy who was learning to carry things quietly. He wore a navy jacket too thin for the season and held nothing in his hands. I froze. Judith followed my gaze and leaned in. "Want me to send him off?" she asked. "No," I said softly. Let's see if he came as himself or as their messenger. Lucas spotted me and walked over, slow, uncertain. I stepped out from behind the desk. He stopped a few feet away. "Hi," he said. "Hi. I saw your name on the volunteer board online," he said, rubbing the back of his neck. "Didn't know where else to find you." I didn't ask how long it took him to work up the courage. I could see it on his face. The same expression Andrew had when he was 14 and broke a neighbor's window, but told the truth anyway. "Do your parents know you're here?" I asked. "No." "You tell them if you want to." "But I'm not calling anyone." He nodded, looked down. "I didn't come to defend them," he said. "I don't even know everything they did, but I know you left, and I know it was bad, and I think—" He looked up again, eyes a little red. "I think I should have asked more, before." "You were a child," I said. "It wasn't your job." "Still," he said, "you were always kind to me. I should have at least said goodbye." That did something to me. A small tear along a seam I thought I'd already stitched shut. "Would you like to sit?" I asked, gesturing to the reading chairs by the window. He nodded. We walked together in silence. He didn't touch his phone, didn't fidget, just lowered himself into the seat and waited. I sat across from him. We looked at each other for a long time. "You were the only one who remembered my birthday last year," he said. "You sent that little wooden puzzle. I never told anyone, but I still have it. It sits on my desk." "That's good," I said. "They told me you were tired, that you needed space, that you were confused sometimes." His voice cracked slightly at the last word. I didn't correct him. I didn't need to. He looked at his hands. "I don't know how much they took, or what they did, but I know how they talk when they think no one's listening. And I remember how you looked at dinner sometimes, like you were underwater." That was the truest thing anyone had said to me in months. He didn't ask me to come back. He didn't try to fix it. He just sat there, awkward and sad and real. "I'm not asking for anything," he said. "I just wanted you to know I still think about you, and I'm sorry if I didn't show it sooner." I reached across the table, not quickly, and laid my hand gently over his. He let it stay. We didn't speak for several minutes. Then I said, "You don't have to choose sides, Lucas. You just have to choose what kind of man you want to be." He looked at me, and I saw his face shift, not into guilt, not into shame, but into something closer to understanding. "I'm trying," he said. "I believe you." Eventually, he stood. I didn't walk him out. We'd said what we could, but just before he reached the door, he turned back. "Can I come again? Just to visit?" "Yes," I said. "If you come as yourself." He nodded. Then he left. I sat back down, the afternoon light slanting across the room, and for the first time since I'd walked out of that house in the middle of the night, I felt something open in my chest. Not forgiveness, not yet, but maybe the beginning of it. The letter came in a white envelope with a firm black logo in the top corner. Sullivan and Crane, LLP. No return address, just the name. I didn't open it right away. I made tea first, sat by the window with the envelope on the table in front of me like it might start talking if I looked at it too long. But it stayed quiet. Letters like that always are. The real noise comes after. I opened it with a butter knife. No rush. No shaking hands. The letter inside was 5 paragraphs long, neatly formatted, signed in blue ink. "Dear Mrs. Jordan, we are writing on behalf of our clients, Mr. Andrew Jordan and Mrs. Sarah Jordan, regarding recent actions taken involving shared financial accounts, property, and legal responsibilities. Our clients have expressed concern over the abrupt nature of your departure, your decision to block account access without prior notice, and the potential legal ramifications of these actions. They are particularly troubled by the absence of communication and the emotional distress these changes have caused to the family, including minor dependents. I stopped there. Minor dependents, I said aloud. They're 11 and 14, not orphans. I kept reading. Our clients are open to resolving this situation amicably and suggest a mediated conversation with legal counsel present to discuss a path forward that is respectful to all parties. Should this invitation be declined, we may be forced to explore legal avenues to ensure proper accounting and access regarding shared financial and family matters. We trust that you will act in good faith and respond within 14 days of receipt of this letter. It ended without warmth, just a signature and a deadline. I folded the paper slowly, placed it back in the envelope, and stood up. The tea had gone cold. 2 hours later, I was sitting across from Ruth in her office again. She read the letter silently, lips pressed together, pen tapping once against the folder on her desk. When she finished, she placed it down and looked at me. "You okay?" I'm not surprised. No, but I'd hoped they'd at least pretend to apologize. I shrugged. They did, in their own way. They're sorry I woke up. Ruth didn't smile. She never did when the subject was Andrew and Sarah. "This letter isn't a real threat," she said. "It's a push, an attempt to intimidate you into backing down, into giving them a seat at the table again. They don't get a seat anymore." "Good," she said, "because you have every legal right to protect your assets. Everything we've done is above board. If they want mediation, we can say no. If they pursue action, we respond formally. But I doubt they'll follow through. This is a bluff. They don't want court. They want silence." "Well," I said, leaning back, "they can have silence, just not on their terms." Ruth pulled a form from the drawer and handed it to me. "Just in case," she said. "Statement of intent. If you want, I can file this with the court. Preemptive. Makes your current standing harder to challenge." I signed it without hesitation. No flinching. No looking for Andrew's face in the air around me. He wasn't in the room anymore. Not in my thoughts, not in my decisions. Ruth slid the form into her file. "They're not used to the version of you who says no," she said. "I'm still getting used to her myself." "You're doing fine." As I left her office, I walked slower than usual, not from age, from certainty. I was no longer acting from fear, no longer reacting. This was the part of the story where I had already left the house, already reclaimed my name, already built a room of my own. And now? Now I was simply closing the doors behind me, letting them knock if they wanted. But I wasn't letting them in. The days are quieter now. Not empty, just quiet in a way that feels earned. Mornings start with the same slow ritual. Kettle on the stove, window cracked open to let in the cold, soft sounds of seagulls or passing feet. Some days I walk to the library. Some days I don't. No one asks me to justify either. I still see Lila once a week. She brings muffins or paperwork, and we sit at my little table and talk about ordinary things. Tenant meetings, her dog's ruined couch, the strange things people leave in the building laundry room. She never asks about Andrew. She never brings up Sarah. That silence, too, feels like respect. Lucas visits sometimes, never with warning, never too long. He brings a book or a pastry or nothing at all. We sit and read or talk or don't, and it's enough. The last time he came, he asked if I remembered the story I used to tell him about the girl who ran away and found a home in the forest. I always thought that was made up, he said. It was, I told him, but I didn't know then how much truth a made-up story can hold. Sometimes I think about writing things down, not for them, not even for Lucas. Just for myself. Not a memoir, God forbid, but something small, a quiet record, a way to say, I was here. I saw what I saw. I felt what I felt. I left when I needed to. Ruth still checks in. She told me last week that Andrew and Sarah haven't filed anything. Their lawyer's silence is louder than any letter they could send. I'm not waiting for another envelope. I'm not waiting for an apology that will never come. That was the old me. The version who thought love was proven by patience, by endurance, by staying even when it hurt. But I've learned that staying and disappearing can look the same from the outside, and I will not vanish again. There's power in refusal, not the loud kind, not the dramatic door-slamming kind, but the still kind. The kind that says, you do not get to define me anymore. You do not get to rewrite the story and leave me as a footnote. I don't hate them. I wish I did. Hate is clean, sharp. But what I feel is more like distance, the kind that no letter or lawyer or invitation to a holiday dinner can close. And that's all right. Some people lose you slowly. Others lose you all at once, in the middle of the night, with nothing but a suitcase and a folded envelope of truth. They don't always notice the moment it happens, but they always feel the absence. Irene calls from time to time. Her voice always cuts through the day like a familiar wind. She asks what I'm making for dinner, tells me about her blood pressure, about a neighbor who sings opera in the shower. We're old, May, she says, but God, we've earned it. I think about that a lot. What it means to age not just in body, but in clarity. To choose peace over performance. To choose yourself, not in spite of anyone else, but for once without apology. I won't end this by telling you it all got better. That's not how life works. But I can tell you this. I am not afraid of the quiet anymore. I do not belong to those who tried to control me. And if you're reading this and it feels familiar, if something in you knows the sound of a locked drawer or a paper signed in your name, know this too. You are not too old to walk away, and they are not too powerful to stop you. You're allowed to leave, even if it's late, especially if it's late. And when you do, don't forget to leave the door open for yourself on the way out. You might be surprised who's waiting there. If this story spoke to you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And if you've ever left quietly, or wanted to, leave a comment below. You're not alone.